Beach FM, locals talking to locals.
Beach FM, and great to welcome back Chair of the Waikanae Community Board, James Westbury. Good morning, James.
Oh, good morning to you. How are you?
I'm fine. I believe you've been discussing the beach bylaw, which I believe the officers' proposals have been largely adopted by council. What's your stand on the beach bylaw as it is emerging?
Yeah, so the beach bylaw hasn't been approved per se. Like I participated yesterday in the Strategy and Operations Committee meeting, and this was on the agenda. And a number of members of the public came and participated in this is essentially the discussion aid to or a consultation of a proposed bylaw. And the beach bylaw gets reviewed basically every 10 years. So Capi Council is actually legally obliged to review and republish their beach bylaw and have it in effect in 2021. So it's really important that with the consultation that's just going to go out, that members of the community start becoming involved, because this actually affects everybody who uses the beach. It's about, the behaviour of individuals on the beach. It's about the use of, boaties using and boaties access to the beach, whitebaiters access to the beach, horse and stock on the beach, about preservation and harvesting of food, for example. There's quite a few bits and pieces, and about the use of blow carts, for example.
Oh, yes.
What's really interesting about the bylaw, though, it doesn't actually have any control over the protection of dunes of fauna and flora, because that's actually controlled by different legislation. So this is about, so a lot of people get confused by thinking that this bylaw is there to protect the dune environment per se. It's not so much about that. It's about the activities that are allowed to occur in a beach environment. So,
and some of those activities could affect the flora and fauna, couldn't they?
They do by virtue. So it's about putting in place appropriate control mechanisms. So what's being proposed in the proposed bylaw is, say, for example, where you have car parking access or vehicle access to a beach, that's actually going to be restricted with a gate that's going to be controlled. And that, there's a lot of things that go with that. Does that mean beach access is elitist? If you've got a boat and you're registered, and how do you get registered? It could raise concerns about that. Or is it going to push people who might have gone on the beach and acted in a good citizen? Does it stop them going on the beach, or does it push a problem with, recidivist bad behaviour, and does it push them to another beach down the coast somewhere else? And we might have a problem, say, in Waikanae, but then does that problem get pushed up to Peka Peka? So just these are some of the things that the public need to consider. It's really important, and this consultation is actually going to hopefully start in the next few weeks with regards to timeline, and it's going to be a consultation, as my understanding, over a 5-week period. And what we'd encourage people to do is get in touch with the council with regards to reviewing the proposals and the potential changes and how that might impact them.
I've got a feeling this may be somewhat controversial. So the Strategy Committee did go along with the officers' recommendations about gates and closed-circuit TV cameras. It just seems to me that that is highly controversial.
Indeed, and personally, I'm not a big fan of using such a mechanism to manage access to the beach. I think the Kiwi way of life is actually free access to the beach. It's about maybe educating and using signage, because at the moment, the public are actually feeding back that the signage of the rules and restrictions is very poor. So actually, they don't know how to behave, or not instructed how to behave appropriately. And naturally, some people don't know. But then there's also the side of me that thinks, well, actually, for the 0.5% of the bad people, should we have to do a draconian measure to the whole population? And that's something people need to start feeding back on. Is that a fair and reasonable approach? Are we using a sledgehammer to crack a nut?
And I think it's got a problem, or at least the potential of being perceived as elitist, whereas the guys rich enough to have their boats and get their cards from the boating club, whoever it's going to be managed, they can swipe their cards and get through the gate, whereas, the 80-year-olds who just love having a look at the sea won't be allowed through the gate, or potentially
Indeed.
won't be. So there just seems to be an equity issue potentially, and therefore I think there's going to be a lot of discussion about that.
And, to be honest, I think the community quite rightly needs to be involved. And, don't get me wrong, I do believe there needs to be some control about access on the beach and what is right and proper behaviour. That's to be expected, and where vehicles should be allowed to drive and shouldn't be allowed to drive. But I think the control mechanisms for that need to be thought a little bit more carefully. Do you put in place, because the beach bylaw will only be reviewed every 10 years, so do you put in place, okay, that they are thinking of gates but use different tools and mechanisms to control access in the interim, rather than going straight towards a proposal to manage it through a gated community type of arrangement where people have cards or cameras to enable people to get access.
Indeed, so that's a controversial aspect of it. The rest of it seems to me to be pretty much, a reasonable attempt at coming up with a way of regulating what is a very important piece of landscape for our communities.
Yeah, in general, I think the majority of the content of the proposed plan and what the proposals aren't unreasonable in terms of about, horses on the beach and, creating a code of etiquette for managing, horses on the beach and when they'll be allowed on the beach. I think that's not unreasonable.
Yes.
Rather than taking a draconian, no, they shall not. Taking a horse on a beach has been a very Kiwi. I came from a farming rural background, and we used to take our horses down the beach quite frequently. Admittedly, they weren't in highly populated beach areas, but I think there's some things we'd like to hang on and have a little bit of nostalgia for and enable those to continue where they aren't or don't pose any significant health risk or risk to the public.
Right. So, James, I believe a gate has been proposed for McLean Park, or is quite likely for McLean Park, run by the Kapiti Boating Club. Is there a similar gate proposed for Waikanae Beach?
There is indeed. And they, in terms of costs, unfortunately I wasn't able to attend the original briefing where they did talk about costs, but I can imagine having a gated system that's observed by a camera or a digital system with regards to setting up power and internet to enable it to work would not come at a small cost, to be honest. Even the most basic digital security systems that we have in place at the moment, are around 10 to 20 grand. So I suspect something that the council would be looking at would be in the vicinity of, maybe up to $50,000 to $60,000.
Goodness me. Well, more discussion to come. Do you think there's any particular issues with Waikanae Beach that should be part of the consultation to come?
Well, in terms of the white baiters, they're very concerned about the lack of access that they'll have to the beach with regards to the proposed plan. So I'd really strongly encourage those individuals to participate in the feedback. And I'm aware of a number of the members of these groups, and I'd really encourage them to make sure that their views and thoughts are written down and communicated to council and council officers, so they really understand that the impact of their decisions and how it might affect. At the end of the day, council's there to represent the ratepayers and the individuals, and making sure that they're protecting the public. And how far do you take those obligations without being too draconian?
Indeed.
And it's a challenging one. You're not going to appease everybody, but some things do need to change. But then again, I think there's a lot that just needs a little bit of tweaking around the sides without having to potentially put gates in front of our beach accesses.
Right, and so now the interesting bit comes, because now we're asking the public to play their part, to make their views known, because that's the way democracy works. And if we don't make our views known, obviously democracy cannot be perfect, cannot even appreciate the many other aspects to a particular issue. So that's what consultation's all about, and we do hope that people will consult. And I suspect they will vigorously on this one, on the beach bylaw. James, it's been a pleasure once again. Thank you so much for your company here on Beach FM.
Thank you very much.
106.3 Beach FM.